Ladies and gentlemen, we are live broadcasting with the lucky 13th episode of the Mormon Dads podcast. And as always, Jeff is with us and Mark is with us. And there is a dog outside barking that I don't know if people can hear.
Is that your house or my house?
It's not my house because we don't have any dogs around here that have that deep of a bark. So today we were going to talk about family traditions, and so an anecdote to lead into this podcast episode. We went backpacking this weekend on my son's first backpacking trip, and the scoutmaster who planned the trip spoke in church that next Sunday, and the backpacking trip has nothing to do with this part of the story, but his talk was on traditions, and it was kind of a funny talk because he talked about some of the bad traditions that that people had told him about. He went around his work and was like, what's a good tradition that your family had and a bad tradition that your family had? And so people would say stuff like, a good tradition would be, I can't remember, I only remember the bad ones. Is that bad? But something like they would go get sundaes on Sunday after church. They would all hop in the car and drive to Arctic Circle and get sundaes after church. And that was just what they did. And he got on his mission and was like, oh, so you shouldn't go get sundaes after church? So yeah, I thought this could be a good topic to talk about family traditions, hopefully focusing on the positive traditions that help support a good LDS lifestyle and help support strong family values. So, and I'll go ahead and start. I think the one family tradition that comes to my mind is just Sunday dinner, and it's something that's so simple, but it's something that we look forward to every single Sunday almost. And it started when I was a little kid, and we would go over to Grandma's house for dinner, and then when we lived with my grandma, all the aunts and uncles would come over to our house, and the cousins would come over to our house, and we would just eat dinner and hang out and play football in the backyard and play baseball in the backyard and really just be together as a family. And we've continued that tradition with my mom now, does the family dinner every week or almost every week, and all of my siblings, we all miss a week here or there, but for the most part we all get together and hang out and just spend time together as a family. And that's been probably my favorite family tradition throughout my life that has really kept our family super close and super strong. Do either of you guys do that also? Mark, maybe not as much since your family is back east.
Pretty far away, yeah.
That would be an expensive tradition.
Well, and even growing up, we didn't really do that. I don't know, and I guess, we lived there, so obviously we had dinner together, but it wasn't like a set night where everyone had to be home and be there for dinner.
Right. What about you, Jeff?
Even though most all my family's here and my wife's family, it isn't something we do. I've never on either side of my family had a kind of a Sunday dinner tradition. So I'm not sure why, but it just isn't something we've done as a tradition. No, that's unique to you and this between the three of us, man.
See, and for some reason I thought that might be just something that a lot of families did. So maybe 30%, 33% of the families in the church do that.
This seems like a reasonable sample size.
Yeah,
so
significant sample size for sure. But my wife's family used to do it, and it was a fun tradition because my father-in-law knew that I liked ginger ale, and so every week there was a ginger ale sitting at my place at the table, and I
Nice.
really liked that. That was really nice. But we don't really do dinners with them much anymore. Maybe 2 times a year, 2 or 3 times a year, as they've gotten older, and it's harder for them to put it on. But no, that for me, getting the extended family together has been super powerful and very helpful in keeping our family really close.
So, for Mark and I who don't do that, I'm just thinking there's other traditions we have we'll talk about, but should we have traditions? I guess before we really get too heavy into the topic, if we don't do something fairly consistently, should we? Do we have some kind of parental obligation to start if they're not existing now?
Like, go ahead, Mark.
Well, it's interesting because my initial reaction is to say yes. Traditions are very important because it's something that kind of, like you said, brings everyone together and something that everybody kind of grounds themselves with. But then at the same time, I'm sitting here having a hard time thinking of any family traditions that we have in our family.
So, could it be that we're thinking of the word tradition incorrectly, and maybe we're talking more about habits that our family, things that we just do together by habit that help support, living a gospel-centered life?
Maybe.
Because we've talked about like family scripture study, which our family's doing much better at since we talked about it on the podcast. That was like a
Nice.
motivating force for me. But that's a tradition, and family prayer, that's a tradition. But there are also habits of things, routines. Maybe routines is a better word.
Yeah.
Right. Or something that happens daily.
Or weekly.
But like when I think of traditions, I think of in my family a couple of things. One is in the summer. My family, since I was born, since years before I was born, so it's 40 years now probably, we all go camping to the same campground during the same week for 40 years.
Wow.
And whoever can be there, great. And obviously you can't get everybody there all the time. But 40 years later, I had my grandparents, my parents, and numerous sets of aunts and uncles, cousins. It was a big to-do. And every year, we just kind of plan that that's when you book your summer vacation and go do this. So that's what I think about when I think of traditions. And I think there's more than just going camping that I look forward to that. There's something about, I don't know if it's honoring the thing that my grandparents started 40 years ago. Maybe there's something important to that for me. But it's good for my kids. It seems to be good for us as a family to do something like that. And it's deep-seated in my family. It's something they've done forever. So that's what I think of when I think of traditions in my family.
So that's one that you've got, but that's a capital T tradition.
Yeah.
That's that long and that deep-seated. But when you ask the question about, are we obligated to start traditions, like your grandparents had to do that the first time,
Yeah.
and then the next year say, hey, we're going to do that again, and then the next year say, we're going to do that again, until it really became a solid tradition.
Then everyone had to buy in too. Like the biggest tradition I think of in my family fizzled out as we all got older.
Mm-hmm.
So the one I always think about is back in New Jersey, all of the extended family on my dad's side all went to my aunt's house on Christmas Eve. They built a house kind of out in the woods somewhere. And so they wanted to spend Christmas kind of to themselves. And so they invited everybody over on Christmas Eve. And we called it a Pollyanna, but everybody put their name in a hat on Thanksgiving and drew one out. So you just could buy one good present instead of having to spread your money across the whole entire extended family. And we would all go to her house on Christmas Eve and a big potluck dinner and exchange presents and watch whatever game might be on. And then that way on Christmas Day, we had more time with our families and could go visit our grandparents and didn't have to worry about trying to get them in as well. But as we all got older, and so, I went away to college and stuff and haven't really been home too much more, but everybody started wanting to do their own Christmas Eve tradition with their new families as they got married and had kids. And I was going to go home for Christmas this year, and my parents actually told me it's not even worth it anymore because they all fight over whose house they're going to go to now, and it's just not the same as it used to be. Like before, it was just kind of like Jeff's family. Like you just knew. We went to Aunt Mary's house on Christmas Eve, and then you go visit everybody else on Christmas Day. But now they kind of all do their own things and don't even all see each other anymore.
That's interesting because we've had family traditions that have morphed over time too, where we used to go to my Aunt Vicky's house and we did the same thing, and me and my cousin would always buy a cassette tape, and he would buy me Erasure, and I would buy him something by Aerosmith or Def Leppard or something like that. And then we would wrap it in the most duct tape that we possibly could to try to make it the hardest thing to get into ever. And so that was our Christmas Eve tradition forever and ever. And I wonder if, because I don't remember when we stopped doing that, but I know that when I married Michelle, like Christmas Eve belongs to her family, and that's just it. They don't do Thanksgiving ever, and because they want Christmas Eve to have a big party, and Santa Claus comes and hands out presents, and we sing "Here Comes Santa Claus" like 20 times in a row because Santa Claus is always late, but they wanted us to be singing when Santa Claus walks through the door. So, but like that's the big deal, and so for our family now, that's the tradition, is to go there for Christmas Eve, and it will be interesting to see because they're getting older, and when they pass away, like I don't know what happens to that Christmas Eve tradition.
Right.
I think it may be natural, and Mark kind of talked about this. It's natural for these traditions to have to change and morph, because you're not in New Jersey anymore, Mark. You know,
Right.
it just simply doesn't work logistically, and that's what we've even found with many of our traditions. And most of my family still lives close here, but we're 4 generations down the line now. You know, my grandparents have great grandkids now, and that makes it pretty tough when grandkids especially, get married and they have other families and other obligations. But maybe, and I guess I always throw out questions because I'm curious what you guys think. Even if they morph and change, there seems to be something inherently important about tradition. Because when I listened to you guys just talk, both of you talked about what you used to do as kids or even just before you got married, and they were good memories. They were things that made you think of family and home. So there seems to me, as a dad, I need to make sure we're at least doing something, whether it's a Christmas thing, whether it's a summer thing, whether it's a Sunday dinner thing. There seems to be something inherently important that we should strive to conserve as a family. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and that leads into a question that I've been thinking about as we've been talking about, is what are the benefits of traditions? And you're just saying there seems to be some benefit there, but it seems to be eluding us to be able to really name what that is.
I think you can call it a constant in your life. There's so many things going on. You're going to, kids are playing sports and dance, and the seasons change, and they get older, and their interests change, and then you go on to better schools, and us ourselves, we take better jobs and change careers, or at least the location of those careers, and just life is so busy and always changing. I think it's important to have those constants that we can always count on in our lives.
Yeah, I agree with what Mark said totally, that amid all the chaos, you've shown your kids, you've decided as a family that there's certain things you're going to prioritize, where all that has to be second fiddle for a short time. That if it's just for an afternoon, or if it's for a week, or if it's for just a day, for some amount of time the world has to stop so that you can focus on these intrinsic things. If it's just your immediate family, you and your wife and your kids, awesome. If it can be all the way back to great grandma and grandpa, awesome. But for just a moment, you show some priority other than, like you said, Mark, basketball and dance and everything else that we run around doing.
Right.
Well, so to kind of put maybe a different angle on that, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm just trying to spin this, but it sounds like what we're saying is that traditions bind us together as families, since we're talking about family traditions, but that those traditions bind us together where we're all involved in these individual pursuits or whatever things that we're doing individually, and then we say, okay, here is the tradition, and it gives us a sense of identity where, like, this is what we do, and it binds us together, and brings us closer as families. And I think a big part of that is just that in all the traditions that we've talked about, it's about spending time together, like all the Mormon ads say, right?
It's about time. Which, by the way, I have a big complaint about those Mormon ads.
Because
it has nothing to do with our topic.
Well, then you got to tell us about it, Mark.
Yeah, so, we haven't stayed on topic through a whole podcast yet. So,
so here's my first memory of those commercials. I come out to Utah to go into the MTC. I got set apart on a Sunday night so that I could come out and spend some time with a buddy of mine and with my sister, who was already out here starting at BYU, and before I went into the MTC on Wednesday. And so my buddy dropped me off at the MTC in between classes, so he literally just dropped me off, said goodbye, and took off. And so they rifled me through the MTC, put your stuff here, come in this, and then we go into the gym, and they have people watch those commercials until a certain time when they start kind of your presentation, So everybody's sitting there with their families, and there I am just by myself for 45 minutes having to watch these commercials about family when I'm the only one who doesn't have my family there. And then at the end of the thing, they do their little spiel, and then the missionaries go one way and the families go the other way. And so yeah, it didn't put me in the best of moods as my first day at the MTC.
Well, having to leave my family while they were there didn't put me in the best of moods either. My first day at the MTC, so I guess it's a lose-lose situation.
Well, that's a bleak outlook on Mormon ads. Jeez.
Well, the concept is important. I agree.
I thought you were going to say that you've found the secret to having time not be the answer. You don't have to spend time with your kids, and you can work all the time and watch sports all day and watch Netflix on TV, but still have a good relationships with your kids. But that's not what you're saying.
No, definitely not.
Okay. It was just
How about if I'll segue that for a minute, though. I was just reading an article and it wasn't an LDS article, but it goes along with the tradition topic. I'm bringing us back, Mark. I'm putting us back on topic.
Sounds good.
And the article was it was called "It's Not About Quality Time," and the point is that it's important for us to make sure we're spending time. And this guy talked about summer vacation, that he went on a vacation with the extended family every year, similar to what I explained that we do. And he said that what he's found by doing that and forcing himself to stay there for the whole 10 days, because years in the past he wanted to get the heck out, but when he committed himself to stay, he found that like a nephew or a niece would all of a sudden, when they're out one day, just want to open up and ask him some serious questions and to have, you know, a serious discussion about important topics. That if he would have left a little early, that wouldn't have happened. And so his point is when you set aside time to be with those that you love and care about, and you simply just spend that time, and it goes back to what we talked about, make the world wait for a minute while we do these things with our family, that may create the environment for a conversation where someone opens up or somebody confides in you or somebody wants advice. And that there's got to be time spent, and it's got to be a quantity of time. And we could have this subject, I guess, another day totally, but it kind of goes in with traditions that if those family members know they're going to see you for that amount of time, you never know what might come of that.
That's very true.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, where, because what you're talking about is trust. There is someone's not going to open up to you if they don't trust you, and it's hard to build trust unless you've spent a sufficient amount of time and had a sufficient number of interactions to be able to build that trust. So, plus, you know, I think that I think for our family, because we do a summer trip every year, and we go down to a ranch down in southern Utah. Maybe we should come up to your guys' ranch every other year, Jeff.
All right. That sounds good.
But I don't think people want to drive with 3-year-olds for 12 hours to get there. 6 hours is a lot more manageable. Yeah. But we go down there, and one of the things that I appreciate is, just spending time with everybody and playing games and getting to know everybody and telling stories or whatever, but also that my kids are just around these good people, and they're watching these people who are good parents, and they're seeing great examples of people who live the gospel and who treat each other well, and even my siblings who aren't active and have no belief in the church whatsoever, but they're great, wonderful people, and for my kids to be around that intensively for, you know, a number of days, it's wonderful for my kids to be able to have those examples and to be able to get to know their family and build close relationships with their family also.
Yeah, I like that, Matt. I would echo most of that with my family traditions and the time we spend as well. The only thing I would add that I also really value, and again, I've grown up around all my family. So when I was born, I had, I think, 6 grandfathers and 7 grandmothers alive. So there was 5 generations of Shaws when I was born in Cardston. And when my daughter was born, there was 5 generations again of Shaws alive in Cardston. And so when we do these family things now, that story goes on. I only have 1 living grandfather alive anymore. But my kids are able to spend time with my grandparents, and even for a short time my great-grandparents, and I think that those multi-generational bonds and relationships are far more important than we may think on the surface. I think my kids having an understanding of my grandparents is a huge benefit to them. Being able to have a relationship with my grandparents is a huge benefit just in understanding their belief system and understanding the context of their lives and what they grew up having to do. I think that's huge. And for me and my family, those traditions we've developed put them in proximity to those family members where they can learn all that and they can talk with them and they can visit. And that's on top of everything you said, Matt. I also add that when it's that generational bond that can be established.
Is that part of the fulfilling of the prophecy?
The heart of the children to the fathers?
Yeah, the Elijah prophecy.
Well,
I'm
maybe.
counting that as fulfillment right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that is an example of what we talk about with eternal families, right? Is welding that link generation to generation. That's why we do temple work. That's why we do genealogy and read family histories and do those, is so that we can have that, we can connect the generations together. And I think that when you started talking about understanding the identity of who I am in context of who's gone before me and who's coming after, I think that those I think that has really helped to shape my identity as a person, and the who I believe that I am, and the self-confidence that I have, and the expectations that are out there for me to strive to live up to, that my grandparents on both sides said. I think that's a really powerful, and has been a powerful motivator in my life, that maybe I didn't even realize how powerful it was until just now, when you were talking about that importance of traditions that can connect generations together. So I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing that up.
You bet. Just happy to have a positive impact on the discussion, man. Well, have we solved all the world's tradition problems?
Maybe. Should we talk about how we can create family traditions, or like what? I don't know what the entry point into that discussion would be, but I just looked at an article on family traditions, and it says 3 types of traditions every family should have. We could hit those. One is daily connection traditions. To me, that looks like family dinner.
Yeah.
At night.
Or scripture study, or...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those things that you do daily. Weekly connection traditions, and then life changes traditions, which weekly connection traditions, I think of going to church. So after during the talk, since my kids get bored during church sometimes, my wife, as the guy was talking about family traditions, my wife handed my kids a notebook and said, write down our traditions. And one of the first ones that they put down was going to church. And I thought, that's cool. Even though they don't like going to church, that they recognize that that's a tradition, and it's something that's very important to us as parents that we go. I think that that's a great one. I don't know what other weekly, I guess family home evening would be a weekly connection tradition. Which something is interesting that's coming to me in kind of talking about these different types of traditions is about how much, without even us realizing it, because at the beginning of the podcast, we were like, well, I don't really know about family traditions that we have, but that the framework of the church provides, well, I should say the church provides an awesome framework for each of these 3 levels of traditions. The daily with the scripture study and the daily prayer together and eating meals together. I guess that's not a church thing. but then the weekly going to church and family home evening. And then life changes traditions is the third one, and I think about baptisms and priesthood ordinations and baby blessings and missions, and that's really fascinating. And it's something that I might spend more time thinking more deeply about. I might go to bed after we finish recording this and then not think about it again ever until I edit this. But like the church really provides a framework in a powerful way to develop all of these traditions that support strong family bonds and strong family unity and the transmission of our religious values and family values to our kids. Like that's a big deal. I don't know that my voice is accurately portraying how excited I am about that realization, but I tend to speak a little monotone even when I'm excited. But no, that's cool to me.
Good.
Any thoughts from you guys around any of those three levels of traditions, or the epiphany that came to me?
Well, I think the epiphany hit you harder than maybe Mark and I, and that's fine. That's how it works. Because last week, if you recall, I was quite fascinated by the whole definition of shame versus guilt. Anyway, that one really took me last week, so that's how this whole thing worked, right?
Right.
It's group therapy, so that's fine.
And hopefully there's 33% of our listeners
That's right.
that the epiphany hit and that really meant something to them.
That's why we can't have more people on this, because then less of our listeners will have the same impact, because our sample.
That's a good point. But if we did have more people, say we had 4 people and 2 people thought the same thing,
That's true.
then we can expect a 50% reaction from our listeners.
Yeah, we can extrapolate statistics like crazy, but no, I think you're exactly right that, and it's not by accident that the framework of the church is set up that way. And we can start to split hairs between habits and traditions, but at the end of the day, we have a responsibility as dads to put in place there's a word I want here, but to put in place all of the activities and all of the traditions and all the habits that we need to make sure we're doing what we need to raise our kids. So if there's tools out there to help us do that, never a bad idea to take advantage of. There's no use trying to start from scratch. And the church does provide a good framework for that. I totally agree.
Mark, any final words, any final thoughts?
Well, I think church's whole point is just do as much as you can together. And so I think they put lots of things in play to where if you're following them, you're kind of forced to be together, you know? Maybe your kids want to go out and, you know, maybe they're working or maybe they're going to hang out with their friends every night, but again, having something constant, knowing that on this night I need to go home and be with my family, I think is a big help in keeping the family together. Because, I mean, you know as well as I do, in a lot of the situations we've seen in the places that we've worked, there's lots of students who kind of lose that connection with their family. And so if a family is praying together every day and reading their scriptures together every day and eating dinner together and doing family home evening and going to church together, and you're kind of, forced is the wrong word because it should be a choice to go, but if you're following those rules and those guidelines, then you're in a situation where you will be spending time with your family all the time.
Well said. All right. Well, I think we've covered this topic. So, well, this is sounds like the roughest outro to a podcast.
Yeah, this is smooth, man. It's real
Yeah.
smooth.
So, yeah, we need to come up with like a tagline or something like that signals the end of the podcast, so that they're not this brutal. But anyway,
You could have just said amen after Mark and hit the close button, but
ooh, drop the mic.
No,
Yeah,
I like the idea that we should have some kind of slogan that we can go to at the end of the podcast.
we'll have a whole podcast on potential slogans.
Well, we could petition our loyal listeners to send us what do you think our slogan should be after 13 podcasts? Like what is the consistent theme that they're hearing, and maybe not even hearing, but that it could be that you morons ramble on even after the podcast should have been over 10 minutes ago. That might be our theme. So we'll talk to everybody next week. Enjoy your weeks. Leave us a comment on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you're getting the podcast from. And okay, goodbye.